I'm very excited about this, and just again, I'm so thankful for the Graham and the Recording Revolution, uh, for Dan and Chris for being here, and just everything that we're doing, the preparation that's been put in, and just having the opportunity to share this stuff with you, and all of you guys being here in attendance. Um, there's a lot more information. We're going to continue. There's going to be a lot of. We're going to keep touching on some of the things been talking about. There's going to be a lot more advice, and we're going to start to get a lot more specific about, because we've been creating the context and really trying to reinforce the idea of the way I want you to approach this and think about it, and really trying to reinforce the mental approach, the producer hat in terms of. I mean, the role of a producer is largely one of people management, relationship. Sometimes some you've probably heard there's a little bit of a psychology job, not in like I need to psychoanalyze the people I'm working with and the artists, but you need to be acutely aware of people's personality, their likes, their dislikes, just the mood of things, momentum, how to encourage, how to push. It's like a people job. It's like it takes a little bit of awareness and to be really effective, I feel like as a producer and someone that's going to guide somebody through a creative process, you need to be good at communicating. You need to be good with people. You need to be aware of other people. But I'm also trying to help you guys. You have to be really aware of yourself in this process because you're sort of on your island out there. In the recording, we're getting into phase 3, recording and production. Some of this stuff we've already talked about because like I said, they kind of like blend over the top of each other. There's a lot of great advice that I'm going to be sharing with you, and we're going to get more technical. For those of you that have been patient and hoping to get stuff a little bit more technical, it's coming. It's coming now. So let's just get into it, okay? Do you even need a professional studio? No, you don't. It's we're in a time where you have so much technology available to you. You have so much information. Here we are together. When I was starting, there was nothing like this experience we're having now. No way that I could be mentored in the way that this is happening right. For you guys right now. There's so much information online. And I know they're sort of starting to talk about like some technical stuff here, but there's a couple things I want to share. You do not need a professional studio, and you might argue that the only thing that makes my studio a professional studio is that I have some expensive vintage gear in here, and I'm someone that has a track record of making records. I've gotten paid to do it, so I'm considered a professional. But really, it's but it's not. This wasn't a purpose. I mean, it wasn't from the ground up. Wasn't a purpose. This house, this space was turned into a studio. It was adapted to be a studio. I can't can't give you a tour, but there's this room that's a control room, and then there's a room across the hall. And we have good sound isolation, good treatment. You can see it on the walls. It's a very good acoustic space. Hopefully, you can hear that my voice sounds pretty reasonable in the space. It's not echoey. It sounds balanced. Space across the hall is set up to be a recording space, and there's a couple ISO booths in there. So no, you can sort of do that. Danny, who's my assistant, that's here, that you won't see him. He's off camera, but he made an EP. He at a house that he kind of made a makeshift studio out of. You just bring the gear in, set up, and kind of make it work. You do not need a professional studio. You do not probably have the experience or the financial resources that you should go there yet. I'm not saying it's not going to be part of. Excuse me, one sec. It's not going to be part of the picture for you, or that it won't be a part of your record making process. It certainly could. But please don't go to the professional recording studio and spend the big bucks until you have done your homework and you know exactly what it is you're going to that studio to record and why you're going to be there, and have your feet under you. Try to do as much as possible at home. Okay, it says use electric keyboard for piano, DI the guitars. Have other musicians record their parts in their own home studios and send them over. Well, we talked about that second point, having people record things in remote locations. You could go to them if it's somebody in your town. You could take your session over to them if they have the same DAW. Maybe you're on a laptop. You could take some of your gear over there. They have stuff. You can kind of combine it. However, the first point here about use an electric keyboard for your piano, DI the guitars. Okay, so that kind of comes from the thought of like, well, I'm recording in my bedroom. Well, I mean, that's fine. You probably have enough floor space to have a chair for a bass player to sit on, or a guitar player. Yeah, I don't know how much space you have. We're just going to say that you're a piano player. You've got your keyboard, your chair you sit in at your DAW and work at, your microphone you can have in front of you. You can hopefully have enough room to set up drums, or maybe there's another bedroom you can use to set up the drums. But let's say we're doing it all in the same room. And what I mean by like use an electric keyboard for piano, well, let me jumping around a little bit too much. I use a program it's made by Spectrasonics. It's called Keyscape. I think it's a $400 program. It is keyboard and piano samples, and this is all like organic acoustic type instruments, but the range is huge in this sound library. They have Wurlitzers, Rhodes, Chimatrons, a Celeste, all kinds of grand pianos, upright pianos. Fantastic program. Sounds amazing. I only have a very small piano here. It's what's called a ship's captain piano. That's literally like this big. I don't know how many keys it has on it, but it's not a full scale keyboard. And then I have a weighted keyboard, and we use Keyscape for a lot of our piano parts. And that should be totally sufficient for you at home to get your piano parts down and sound professional and get the idea of the song. There's a lot of sounds to choose from. But that doesn't make any noise in the room. You don't need a microphone for it. That might be a case where if you're doing a record where the piano is a real feature and you feel like that you absolutely need to go record a piano in a space, then that would maybe be something to spend money on later. I will tell you from personal experience that sometimes it's been hard to beat the Keyscape sound that we've had in a production and has been recorded in the early part of a record, to beat it. Because honestly, the space in which a piano fits into a lot of records and modern production, things that have a lot of different instrumentation, it's not such a big space that it fills that you need all of that, dynamic ambient microphone recorded real instrument. Not saying that Keyscape is the ultimate answer, but it's great. I use it all the time. It's not super expensive. If you're a piano player, but in training and that's the kind of music you're going to make, I highly recommend that program as something to use. It'll get you, to get you there, and that's spending less money than most guitar players would have to spend on a guitar or an amp, or like a controller for someone that's making electronic music, or it's sort of all equivalent. And then you can have a direct for the guitars. There's plenty of good amp sim amplifier simulations, emulations that you can sort of get the basic ideas of things down in a recording for an initial recording with just going direct for the guitar. So, or even a bass, a lot of times I don't even use an amp anymore for a bass. I just use a direct signal. If it's recorded well, you can put an amp sim on it, or a little Sans amp, or just a little harmonic distortion, a plug-in emulation, or just put an overdrive pedal, an effects pedal on your way into your DI. I'm also going to encourage you to record the sounds that you want to have in the final production. Don't wait until the mix. That's a bigger discussion, and we'll get there. But what does that allow us? Well, if you're a keyboard player, and you want to record a bass player and a drummer, and you guys are all going to play together, or you just need to record the bass and drums. Well, the bass doesn't need to make any sound in the room through an amplifier. You can take it in direct. And then you have your drums. You set your drums up, and we're going to put a few mics on those. We'll talk about that. And you can get a great sound. And I'm going to tell you also how to add samples to a simply recorded drum kit to make it sound bigger, more finished, more punch. Until you get really good at recording drums, you're giving yourself nothing but trouble by having too many microphones. You should be able to get a great drum sound with, I don't know, 3 to 6 to 8 microphones. I mean, do I sometimes use more? Sure. I really know what I'm doing, and I'm maybe in a space that kind of can accommodate it and it's appropriate for it, but it's not necessary. There are tons and tons of ways to get around it. If you use the right kind of compression and distortion and sort of things that we're going to talk about in mixing on your well-recorded simple drums, you can get them to sound bigger. We will talk about that later, I promise, and I will give you some tips about that. Yes, decide. So we've sort of been talking about decide what you need a professional studio for, if at all, and source and book those times and musicians as needed in advance. When you get to that part of the planning stage, just go back to my same thing that I've been talking about and mantra over and over again: planning. Coordinating musicians' schedules, booking studio time, and being prepared to go in there and make the most of it. You need to plan ahead. Don't just suddenly decide that, I want to go in the studio and record next week. Of course you can do it, but it's not going to be the best use of your time. I guarantee you, I don't know if you guys realize how much a recording studio costs, but here I live in Nashville and in the United States, and I think it's kind of a universal scale around the world. I've done some traveling internationally to record, but a legitimate professional studio that has enough gear in there to be considered a commercial professional studio, it's going to be like at minimum $500 a day. That goes fast, because in a room of that at that price point, you're not really getting a lot of bells and whistles. They don't have a bunch of instruments laying around. Now, some more indie studios do. They're built around the fact that they've got some cool gear, they've got cool instruments, and it's a little bit more of a relaxed environment. So just be careful about how you spend your time and money. Plan. Do your homework well before the recording process, because if you go in and you book 4 days in a recording studio, you're going to spend, what are you going to spend? $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. That's a lot of money for you. That's money that, that $3,000, that $2,000 could buy you enough it could buy you all the microphones that I've suggested that you have, and maybe that Keyscape program, or a couple guitar pedals, or a new software package of new sounds that you don't have, all kinds of things. And you, instead of trying to cram it all into 4 days, of you trying to figure it out and get everything right, the stress is like through the roof. Take the things, woodshed at home, get it as best as you can, like define the direction, and then at the end of it, come January 2nd, if you decide you need a real piano, book the studio, book the player, and go get it done. But, do the work first. What traction? Yeah, you need to understand, that what you're going to go to that studio and record. Be very purposeful, because that money is like, it goes up like gasoline. Yes, and now this also applies to know exactly what you need to do before you go into it, walking into a studio. That also applies to your home studio. Be very clear on the recording days when you invite other musicians in, what the goals are. I think for all stages of this process, make checklists. Make lists of goals, make checklists, keep yourself organized. I cannot emphasize enough how difficult it is to run the computer, pay it, because that's like it's just like when you start trying to run the computer and watch all these technical things and kind of manage all of that stuff, and then also be creative and pay attention to is the vibe happening? Does that sound really like I want it to? Does it fit with the other sound I have? Is it appropriate with what I already started? I mean, now you're working with both sides of your brain. And it's like, that's a very difficult thing to master. You can do it over time. And I have done it myself many times. It's not my first choice all the time. I choose to do it sometimes because I know that it's the right thing for me in a certain situation. But I don't always automatically throw myself into it because I don't have to. Because can I do it? Yes. Do I think it's always the best thing? No. Especially like if I'm the producer and I have a group of musicians. I have like 5 or 6 musicians. Sometimes I have 8 musicians in the studio. That's a lot of microphones. That's a lot of players. That's a lot of opinions. It's a lot of talent. It's a lot of personalities. If I'm at the computer trying to name tracks and figure out if my recording levels are right, well, I can't pay attention to all that stuff. And really what I need to be doing is paying attention to that stuff. So if you're the one person wearing all those hats, try to, get as much technical stuff and planning out of the way as possible. Know your setup, know what things do, hook it up before they show up, troubleshoot it, because I guarantee you, even if you think everything's working before they walk in the room and you set up, something's going to go wrong or something might not sound right and you're going to have to adjust. So be prepared, know what you're going to use and how you're going to use it, and be prepared. And this is, how to avoid stress in the studio. It's just like, well, don't leave things to the recording day if you can plan ahead. Ensure the musicians have already been sent the working demo. I mentioned this earlier for the song. So they're not hearing it for the first time in the studio. Some people work great that way and they're really fast. But those session musicians cost a lot of money and they are used to working very fast. And they can listen to a song and like write out a chart for it in 1 or 2 listens. That's a different scenario, probably not what you're going to be in. So you want to give that local musician that you found an opportunity to be at their best, to feel they're most comfortable, they're most confident, they're most informed, come in and already have had like an opinion, because they're probably going to be nervous too. And, it's just like with them having a plan in place, and that's being a good producer. That's you realizing that the environment you're in and helping prepare that person. That's the relationship part. That's the people part. That's the psychology. That's like, put yourself in their shoes and what can you do to help them? Because ultimately what you're asking them to do is help you create your music. So ensure that they've heard the song, that they understand what the working demo is, so they know what key they're starting in. So they may have an idea of like what instruments they might want to bring. They might realize that, for this particular song, I'm certainly not going to need that, or maybe maybe you can have a conversation around it. Like you send them the song, they listen to it and you're like, hey, did you listen to the song? What do you think? What do you have that you could bring? What are your feelings? And you guys can talk about it before. And it's like, that's pre-production. You're having the conversation, you're getting some things set up. And so you have a plan and that checklist I talked about, what you need to do and how you want to do it. Another good thing is have lyric sheets printed out, because sometimes it's not easy for everybody doesn't hear things the same way. And you probably don't have a final vocal on your pre-production storyboard work tape yet, and having lyrics is like a good way for people to follow along and lay it out in the structure of the song, because you're giving them a way to make some notes. That's like it's something, and some people remember things by like, oh, when it comes to this lyric, I want to be doing this. And then it's also like a good way to be able to communicate. I love having lyric sheets when I'm working with a singer, so that I can be sure that what I'm hearing matches up with what's on the printed page. And it's just like, oh, I didn't understand that's what they were singing, so I need to make sure that that's what the listener is now going to understand as the lyric, or they're singing the lyric different than what's printed here, so I can talk to them about that. Is that what you intend? Do you intend to change the lyric? Because if so, I need to revise this because I want to be sure. And then I like having a lyric sheet when I'm doing a comp. What a comp is after I've made a bunch of vocal takes, maybe it's 3 vocal takes, maybe it's 14, who knows. Sometimes it takes somebody a little while to get warmed up and kind of get in the thing and talk about how it's going and make some corrections before they can actually really start performing the song. Well, like having lyric sheets, I can make notes of like, well, okay, for this line in verse 2, I really liked take 6, and then later I liked take 11. And then when I'm putting the comp together, I could have my little notes that I've made on that, but then I can also just sort of have it as a frame of reference to look at, as much information. Maybe you know how to write a chart and you can have a chart ready. Maybe the musician you're hiring knows how to write a chart and you can ask them to write a chart. You may not know what the key of the song is. Sometimes I don't know what the key of the song is. And it's good to have a chart to know what's going on. So what the progression in the chorus is. It's like it goes from E to C minor or whatever. It's just like, well, you can have a conversation with somebody about where you want to make a change. It's like, hey, on the C chord, can we do this? Or, whatever. It's just good to have all those things prepared. And it says make sure all the musicians are on the same page and know the structure of the song you're recording. Another reason, it's all the same thing. Lyric sheet, sharing a work tape, talking about things, having a chart if that's something, knowing what the key of the song is in. Do you know what the tempo of the song is? Because somebody might need to know to set a delay pedal. Or, it's just good to know because information, there's never too much information when you're trying to communicate about things. Making music and making art and making records is it's very elusive. You're pulling stuff out of thin air, really. And so as much common understanding and dialogue you can have, the better. So these are ways to avoid some stress. It's like everything is clear, having a dialogue. It says start with a middle of the pack song, one that isn't too complicated or that's overly simple to record and produce. Start with that first. Start with the middle. Don't start with the one sort of very simple song because you think that that's going to be a little less pressure, a little easier way to go. It doesn't really set the tone for the session. Also, don't start, like if we're working on our 5-song EP, don't start with that really simple one because it really doesn't, maybe it doesn't incorporate some of the elements that you need to record on the majority of the record, like drums. It doesn't really necessarily set the best tone. And this is not for you working on your own. This is like when you begin to engage others, or it could be on your own. Don't place yourself in the difficult places. A simple song is much harder to record and produce than one might imagine. Sometimes it's actually more difficult than the sort of middle of the pack song. And the song that you think is your single, don't start with that one either. That's way too much pressure to start with either. Get a couple songs under your belt, even if it's just in the same day. Just start with the one that you think that you're the most comfortable with, is the least complicated in terms of interpretation or rhythm. It just kind of represents the middle, if you will. It doesn't mean that it's not a strong song. It just, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. And if you don't, you'll ask me a question. How to avoid stress in the studio. Okay, well, we've already been talking about that, but have your session and project organized. And when it says available, it kind of means if somebody's going to jump in and help you, have the information, have it organized so that so available means like it's easy to interpret and understand. Label your tracks, because I don't know how it works in every DAW, but in Pro Tools, when you call up a new track, you create a new track, it just calls it audio 1 or whatever number, just assigns a number to it, sequentially based on what other audio tracks are there. And then you start recording. Well, if you're recording vocal takes on audio 1, it's just like when you get weeks into the process, well, how do you know which files are the vocal files? What if you run into a problem where you need to, you have a problem with your hard drive, or and you need to kind of recover some files, you need to copy some stuff over. You need to know what you're looking for. It needs to be labeled. It needs to be organized. And also so that, like, if you hand it off to somebody else to work on, like you send it off to a drummer to work on, it's just like, well, it makes sense. It's like they want to know how to turn the vocal down or turn it off, or whatever. It should be labeled. Have your session labeled. It'll be easier for you in the heat of the moment when you're trying to make adjustments and manage the session and manage people. Label your tracks. Have your session and project organized. Take notes on, it says on vocal takes and on instrument takes. Yes, take notes. Shorthand, even if possible. Whatever. Take some mental notes somehow. Make a conscious effort, like I said on the lyric sheet. Write stuff down, or just make notes somewhere, so that as because you're going to be kind of plowing through. Like if you're recording stuff, you want to stay at the speed of creativity. I like to call it. So being organized and being able to document things is super important. So you know what you want to go back to, because you'll get to a point when you're recording something like, oh, that felt great. That was great. You're not going to stop there necessarily. You're going to say, well, maybe I should try it one more time. Well, maybe the next time it's better, maybe it's not. And if you keep kind of along that process, you might, it's like you might have peaked a few takes ago. Tomorrow when you call it up, or next weekend when you call it up, it'll be important to be able to reference your notes. I talked about this earlier. Hook up all the mics you have the session ready before the musicians show up. Be organized, eliminate stress, know what's working. It's huge, makes all the difference, and that's not just in music, in life. Be organized and efficient. The less time you spend clarifying things, the more time you spend creating and recording. Managing the room. Okay, a lot of times this is going to be you managing yourself, but it says musicians should be happy with their work, and so should you. What that means is we'll go back to that bedroom recording where we've got the drummer and the bass player in for the afternoon, morning, evening, whatever day. We got them in. We'll have our session, and maybe you have a specific idea that you worked out from Easy Drummer, and that's what you want the drummer to play. Okay, well, get that down. You're the client. You're the artist. Get what you need down, and make sure it works to what you feel like your satisfaction and vision is. But also ask them what their opinion is. What do they think? They may offer something that maybe is not everything that you want, or it's not a total change for you want. Might be just that one section where they have a different idea that's like, oh, that's really cool. Or, ooh, wait a minute. What if we sort of simplify both ideas and kind of we compare them together? Make them feel involved. Make them feel like that they're contributing. They're not just there to be a robot and play a performed part that you've already defined. Explore. Take the opportunity to explore. Make them feel engaged. Give them the opportunity to feel satisfied with their work. Because in the digital recording age, you can go back to the take that you like afterwards, even if they've recorded a dozen takes. Let them feel important and engaged and inspired, because then they will offer their best talents to you. You ultimately are going to be the filter, and then it's just like humor people if needed. You would rather humor them on the first song, perhaps, or let them kind of go when you just like maybe you indulge them, and not forever, but you indulge them for a few takes, and it's like, okay, great, move on to second song. If you shut them down, this is where the psychology, people management, relationship comes in, communication. If you shut them down, well, you shut them down for the rest of the session, and they will not perhaps be as giving and open and inspired. It's like you kind of hurt their spirit of performance. I mean, maybe they didn't have a good idea or something that you thought was suitable, but because you allowed them to speak and contribute and explore, they have a feeling. I I like musicians to feel like that they're important, because they are contributing, and that's why you identify certain people to play certain things, because you want them to stay engaged and contribute. You want to keep them invigorated for the next song. So that's humor. It's not because you know better. It's just like sometimes you don't know what's possible, and you also don't want to kill the vibe. But let them know when to move on. You're the boss, and it needs to be appropriate. Once a part is laid out, okay. Once you've sort of worked through something before you totally circle the wagons and want to finish it off and say like, okay, we've got it all organized. We know what we're doing. Let's like make it official. Let them listen to it in the control room, like in the room, like let's get off headphones. Like if you've been recording all in the same room and everybody's been on headphones, take the headphones off, unarm the track so you don't get feedback. Play it back through the speakers. How does it feel coming through the speakers? That's a good assessment for you. You might need to make some adjustments and corrections that you're not really getting an accurate picture on the headphones. But then up to that point, maybe everybody's just been listening while they're playing. And then to just listen to it back and not be playing, it's like you get a different perspective. And most of the time, musicians will begin to understand if they're pretty solid musicians, they'll begin to understand how they're playing and how it's translating into the recording and playing back, and then they can make some adjustments and improve not only their parts but their feel and their performance. Or they, maybe with the way their headphones are mixed, they don't hear certain conflicts of sound or things could be clarified differently. So it's important to listen before you actually go for the final takes. That's not to say that you might not have already gotten there before, but it's just a good part of the process. And maybe all they'll say is like, well, they might say to you, and you might feel the same, like, that take was great that we just listened to. Maybe they have one thing they want to fix. So they'd be like, there's that part in the second verse. I think I can do it better. Or you might say, can we try the intro again? Or whatever. It's like that's an important step in things. A lot can be gained from that perspective and how they sound and evaluate themselves. Ask them for their opinion on what they think of their performance is. Just sort of check in. Just don't overload the question, but just sort of say, how's it feeling to you? Are you digging it? Do you like the way you sound? I often ask a musician like that just like, because it's not about a statement about, do I think we're done or not done? Do I think the sound is finished or not finished? It's just like, just checking in. Check in. Do you like the way you're sounding? Does this feel flattering to you? Do you feel like you're fitting in? Do you feel inspired by this? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to draw out inspiration, and being prepared allows you to focus on drawing out inspiration and for you to make creative decisions and not be overstressed with all the hats you're wearing. Maximize their ability and talent. It's very, very important. But if it's just you, try to treat yourself, try to switch hats and try to treat yourself that way. Like, don't get stressed out if you're trying to get that piano part down and you keep messing something up. It's okay. It's okay. Just get the rest of it down. You can go back and fix that one little part. Just try to keep positive energy going. Just sort of like monitor yourself, monitor the situation. And if something gets frustrating and you're on your own, just step away from it for a minute and then come back and listen to it again. You may be wrong about the way you feel about it. Okay, recording and production tips. How to mic up drums in a home studio. Okay. I just want to check one thing. Okay. Okay, recording and production tips. Well, I'm just going to stick with this for the moment, and then there's a couple I have written down that aren't a part of this. How to mic up drums in a home studio. Okay. Well, there's a lot of ways to mic drums. There's a lot of considerations. Take your kick. Okay, so we got our three microphones. We have our large diaphragm condenser. We're going to use this as an overhead. We're going to use this over the drums as a way to kind of try to capture a complete drum sound, right? And find the place over the drums that it feels the most balanced. Sometimes that's closer, sometimes it's far away. At a home studio, you're going to be dealing with low ceilings. Well, be very cautious and aware that if you put the microphone halfway between the floor and the ceiling, you're going to get reflections, right? And this is going to kind of be this gathering point for these reflections. So maybe cheat it to one side or the other, higher from the floor or closer to the floor. Or, it's also take it off, like this in this position is the diaphragm, the capsule, the thing that listens to the sound is parallel with the floor, right? So you're going to get a lot of the reflective sound this way. If you just turn the microphone a little bit, it's not going to gather the sound in the same way. The sound's going to kind of be moving across it. And moving a microphone just a little bit can make a world of difference. If you're in low ceilings and you just can't find the right position above the drums, the tilt is not working, move it away a little bit, like kind of lower it, maybe put it at the height of your ears towards the drums. Walk around your room a little bit, stand around the different spots of the drums, and sort of find something that maybe feels like it's a little bit more balanced for this overhead mic. You don't necessarily even have to use it as an overhead mic. You could use it as a room mic if you want. But just be aware of the sound that you're capturing and how much ambience it has in it and how balanced the drum kit is in it. Thought I had something else I wanted to add. Maybe I'll think of it. Okay, here's our kick drum mic. So, kick drum mic. Don't put it too far inside the drum. Now, some styles of recording and some genres of music, sort of you want that closer to the beater inside the drum, more isolated, more attack-oriented sound. And that's fine. I mean, I typically only put if my hand is the front of the kick drum, I just put it just inside, just a little bit of a hole. Now, maybe you don't have a hole at all on the front of a kick drum. You're going to have to experiment and move the mic around and find the most transparent and most balanced place to hear the kick drum. And just be careful that you're not getting too much bleed and spill from the other drums. If you were to put the microphone too far away from the bass drum or too high up to where it's the drum itself is not sort of creating this acoustic shadow, you're going to get more leakage. That's okay if that's what you desire. I would say it's probably not the place to start. And then you're going to want to put a dynamic microphone on the snare drum. And these three microphones can do a lot for you. If my let's see, how can I do this? If my hand, see, hopefully you can see that. If my hand is the edge of the snare drum, you should put it a little bit over the drum, and like about an inch over the drum and an inch into the drum, and then kind of at this sort of 45 to 30 degree angle. Now, there are no hard and fast rules, but that's sort of like a basic way to mic up a drum kit. And we're not just going to stop there. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. You want to be sure that once you place your microphones, we're gonna want to talk a little bit here about polarity and phase. This is probably something that most of you have some awareness of. And you may be familiar with the idea that if you put two microphones on something, that they are seeing the polarity, the acoustic energy that the source is creating in the same fashion, that they're interpreting it in the same way electrically. And while that is important, I want my overhead mic and my snare mic to be hearing the snare drum and all the other drums the same way. There is also a very important and very overlooked fact in that you can have all 2-3 microphones on your drum kit in agreement with each other the way that they're seeing the sound electrically, but so that's phase. That's the phase is the relationship between two microphones or two source. Polarity is it's something is either working in positive or negative polarity. As you know, like a sine wave has a positive aspect and a negative aspect. But it's also true of the way an acoustic event happens and the way that it's captured on a microphone and the way that it's translated through a speaker. Now, I don't want this to be overly technical, and I want you to be able to understand it. I'm hopeful that most or all of you will. But there is a difference in the way something sounds depending on the way the polarity is. Even if it's just, now listen very carefully, even if it's just one microphone. Okay? So let me explain that a little bit better, or a little bit more in depth. So this we're using this microphone. This is not the microphone you're hearing. We're doing a backup recording. But when I speak into this microphone, or it captures a sound, the sound moves towards the microphone, and it pushes the diaphragm. Right? So it's like it does this to the diaphragm. When it pushes the diaphragm in a technically correct recording, that will translate to a positive amplitude. Right? You want that positive amplitude to come out of your speaker and push the speaker so that it is as accurate of a representation of an acoustic event as it was captured, right? So like if I was standing on the backside of a speaker and speaking to you, the sound would be coming at you and you want the speaker to push it towards you. In pushing the sound towards you, it will sound more stable and more correct. Okay, and this is very easy. You can take a kick drum sample. You can take something you've already recorded, and most EQ plugins have a phase switch on them. And if you simply, and I'm talking just one instrument. It's not about a phase relationship of two microphones on one instrument. It's just one thing. If you flip the polarity on it, you flip that phase switch, that polarity switch. I'm hoping that it at first it's a little bit hard to discern and know what you're hearing, but over time you will learn this. You want to have the sound of the speaker being pushed towards you, creating the sound in front of the speaker. Okay, if a recorded kick drum event is pulling the speaker away, that's not the intended sound. That's not how the acoustic event happens. It's like when a kick drum happens in a space, the sound is projected from the instrument to the ear, and the speaker is designed to project positive amplitude to push it out. And there's a much different sound in it. That's the way the voice coil and the cabinet and everything is designed to work at its most efficient and represent an acoustic event that way. And I know this is getting very technical, but this is something you'll need to listen to this part again. You'll need to think about it, and you're going to need to experiment. So this is where it becomes important. There are two different sounds between something pushing and pulling the speaker, right? It will sound different. To me, it almost always sounds better when it's pushing. It's not incorrect to choose it when it's pulling, but it's a choice. And it's also a choice that will not sound as consistent across many speakers. This is a lot of information about this. I'm very passionate about it, and you will have to sort of like review this and do the work to understand. And the reason I'm making such a big deal about this is because most, if not, I would say the majority of amateur beginning recordings have this fault. And making these corrections, it's possible to correct it after the fact. I don't always get it right, and I change my mind later in the process. But it's so much. It is so powerful how much it can change and fix and transform and stabilize and make a sound really come to life if you get this stuff all working correctly. Okay, so this is where when you put your 3 microphones on the drums that it really matters. If the kick drum microphone is the polarity is correct and it's pushing the speaker, right? But the overhead is capturing it the opposite way. Well, you've got the speaker being told to do the same thing but with two different perspectives. So it has a phase canceling sound, which many of you are aware of probably. And when you make them work in harmony, they will sound fuller and more unified. But the next step that most people don't understand is you need them to push the speaker. Okay, so where this becomes even more important is that if the bass instrument is not in what I would call the correct polarity or better polarity, or I'm not sure what the best term would be, but where it's pushing the speaker, if the bass and the kick drum are doing the job of being united a lot, not necessarily always, but in music they kind of, the things work in harmony, especially in the low end, the kick and the bass, or whatever the low percussive movement is of the production. If one is pushing and one is pulling, and they're trying to work together, and they're happening at the same rhythmic interval, well, what's going to happen? They're going to have a tug of war, and they're going to start to null each other out. It's going to be like the speaker is going to be kind of like confused. It's not a good sound. And this is true across everything. So this is something that is particularly important to drums. This is the place that I find the most mistakes in drum recordings. So just to reiterate really quickly, and we're going to talk a lot about a lot of technical stuff. This is going to go on for a while. To reiterate, what is going to be really important is that you begin to train your ear of what polarity sounds like. And one really good, so having explained all that, one really good way to know what your drums are doing and are they working in harmony, because it can be really hard to, like, if you don't know what you're listening for, you don't know what you're listening for. And visually, it's not always that easy to tell, especially if somebody's playing a lot, it's like they're playing a full drum kit. Because it's like they got frequencies flying all over the place, and the energy is, it's kind of like it's very hard to discern what's going on. Trick I always use is, first, because I'm very experienced, I use my ears. My ears most of the time tell me when something is not right, and I know that I need to go looking. And I have a pretty good idea of where to look. But once I think I've got it sorted out, or I'm at a place where I'm ready to kind of check, what I will do is I'll have the drummer just kick the kick drum. And I'll record that, okay? And I will then look at all my tracks that are associated with the drum kit. So in the case that I'm describing for you, you've got 3 tracks. You got your kick drum track, your snare drum track, and your overhead drum mono mic. If things are in agreement and the kick drum is the only thing that's happening, because the energy of it can be so forceful and it's not as complicated as like a snare drum or a cymbal or any of the other elements of a drum kit, you should be able to see a very distinct positive amplitude happening on all 3 tracks. Now, they will not all be happening at the same exact place on the timeline because the microphones are different distances from the source. That's okay. Don't stress about that. I don't like lining transients up. That takes away a good spatial relationship that we know to be a well-recorded, multi-mic'd picture of something. But that's a taste issue. It's something that you can experiment with. But that is a very good trick. I mean, it might all sound good. You might have gotten the phase of all the microphones to be in agreement, but they all might have a negative first event for the amplitude. You want it to be positive, and just a kick drum with enough time for the transient to happen and for the sound to dissipate. You know, it needs to be somewhat forceful so that it's loud enough for all the microphones to pick it up. That will be a great way to start and for you to begin to get a cohesive drum sound in your recording space. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too long-winded. I'm going to have a sore throat by the end of this from all this talking. I don't normally talk this much. How to record a great energy with the bass and drums when recording at home. Okay, so record them together. Get the center if you can at any time. Performance is what a performed aspect. Even if you're doing electronic music and you've got a lot of programmed elements, record something. Do something live. Give it the human element. Give it a performance. Give it, and so capturing multiple people playing together gives you that relationship or performance. If you're a band, that's what your foundation is already built on. But to get that really elusive energy, you're going to want to record people together. Record the bass and drums together. Another little fun fact for you, another little fun fact, which I will get to in just a second, is that first I want you to evaluate anything that you're recording by listening to it first. Don't look at it first. Listen to it first. If you don't necessarily have to record to a click. Most of you will be recording to a click because we are building this in steps. We're doing this in pieces. So you need something to be the tempo master. You can record your work tape, and if you think it feels perfect, you can record live performances to a live performance. You don't have to have a click to have other people play, as long as it feels reasonable and has the correct feel, and it's not herky-jerky or awkward at times, and someone can follow it. It can be done. But most of the time, you can be working to a click. Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys. I forgot the point I was going to make. Bear with me for a second. Oh, yeah. So recording things together is important. The element of performance. Listen first. Do not just get in there and put things on the grid because you think you're recording to a click and it's got to be exact. Listen to it first. If you're recording drums to that easy and you're keeping that easy drummer part, or you have a program element that you want to keep as part of the production and you want to record an instrument of drums with it, well, listen to it first. If it sounds okay, then it is okay. If you hear the drums flamming, and what flamming is like they're not happening close enough together to where you hear like two events as opposed to kind of like a combination of event that's kind of pleasing. A little bit of this, not being infinitely super tight can be a good thing. The little tip I wanted to share with you is that a well-pocketed drum performance is mostly pretty much on the click or around it, or it maintains a consistent relationship to the click and to the grid. It will oftentimes around drum fills and the downbeats of bigger sections, it will speed up a little bit and it will race the downbeat of a chorus a little bit. That's okay. That's what feels like good energy. As long as it, over the next bar or two or beat, few beats, as long as as long as the drummer returns to the tempo and the relationship that they had going, it will feel natural. It will feel like it has energy. It will feel like it has performance. It will feel like it has a human element. A bass player, oftentimes, and things that are low frequency programming, if you're programming bass parts, it's okay if the attack envelope of a bass part is a little bit slower than the impact of a drum. It can be it can develop a little bit behind. It makes for a nice relationship for those things to happen and for both things to be heard and to carry a lot of weight. In reggae music, the bass player usually plays way behind the drums. Now, I'm not talking like a 16th note behind, but pretty far behind. And that's okay. Don't fix it. If it feels okay, it is okay. Bass, bass always kind of happens on the beat with the kick drum or the whatever the low thing is, or a little bit behind it. Okay. Rarely, and I'm not saying never, but rarely is it ahead. Keyboards and guitars sometimes are ahead because that's the energy that feels good. The drums are the anchor. They're the consistent metronomic groove of the track. The bass kind of can lay back. It's the little bit of the lazier tonal weight and pull. And then some of these other things are sort of the excited higher frequency energy. It's those relationships are okay. Please do not think that once you've recorded something that you need to edit it and get it all to be on the grid. You will take the life out of a good performance if you do that. I'm not saying that you don't edit it, but I'm just saying, and I'll come back to how maybe we edit. I will come back and return to how to go about in the process of editing and how to evaluate yourself and what's good in a little while. But just very important thing to keep in your mind. What order to record instruments in? Well, obviously, because we've been making our work tape, and we've recorded whatever our basic instrument is. You as an artist, what your main instrument is, and it doesn't necessarily. You don't have to have an instrument to be an artist. You can be not just a singer, but you can just do one thing, and figure out how to do the rest, either yourself or with the help of others. But what's going to be important is that you establish the key and the tempo, all these things, like we talked about before. That's what's important to record first. I would say that getting a bass part or a low. Some of you are going to be starting with a bass part. I know certain types of music, hip hop music, urban music, electronic music. All kinds of things. I mean, it's not limited to those. I mean, rock music, all kinds of genres of music sometimes starts with a bass line. I think, for me personally, recording a bass early in the production is a good thing. Because I'm not a fan of when the bass only plays the roots of the chord, or it's just like there's so much information going on with all the other instruments that it is basically relegated to playing the roots of the chord in sync, in cooperation with something that the kick drum or that the bass percussion is, I say kick drum, but it's like, depending on the style of music, it could be like a hand drum or stomps or whatever, wherever your imagination takes you, wherever your genre of music takes you. But I think it's important to record a bass instrument early because there are so many good choices that can be made in that department of an arrangement and a structure to where maybe it's not just playing the roots. I mean, it can play a harmony note. It can set up something for some other parts it can harmonize the chord in a cool way. It can play little riffs. It can play off the vocal, or it can play in unison with other parts. It can play in unison with your guitar or piano part that you've set up, and you really haven't limited its possibility. Many great artists and bands, the Police, the Beatles, I'm trying to think of, Led Zeppelin. I'm just thinking of a lot of rock bands, but um, uh, Sly and the Family Stone. What's his name? Graham. Name's escaping me, but the bass can have such a huge opportunity in music. So I think it's something to prioritize early if you can. Should get that easy drummer in there. Get the drums in there. Hopefully you've gotten a really good working vocal already. It's important in the order of and priority of a song, and it's turning it into a record, is to have a working version of the vocal. The melody, having the melody there is really important. Having the energy of the vocal is really important. It is a super. I just think it's really poor record making to leave the vocal to last. It should be there, some working version of the vocal, even if it's not the penultimate vocal, it's not the final thing, something that represents the vocal performance of the song, because good musicians play the song. And when a song has lyrics in it, a lot of the energy of the song, whether or not the lyric of the song is the most important part in terms of like vocal and storytelling, because there's lots of songs that have vocals in them that's just more just like a vibe, and the lyrics don't make a whole lot of sense, or you can interpret them several different ways. But it's a super important part to have in there to guide everybody about how to play the song, and what the dynamic of the vocal is, what to stay out of the way of, what notes to stay off of, what might conflict with the vocal. I think it's a bad idea to wait to the end. And the other thing that is really positive about recording vocals early and continuing to record vocals as you work towards the finished recorded product is sometimes it takes a singer a while to understand the relationship of the vocal performance to the record, and that might change as the production changes. But if you're doing that work the whole time, you're able to evaluate how good your vocal performance is. Do you feel like that the melody's holding up? Do you like the lyric? Because these are things that you can revise. And we'll get into like how you go about approaching the recording of a vocal in a little bit. What else is important? Sometimes background vocals. I think you should. A lot of times background vocals get left to the last, but I don't necessarily think that that's the right way to do it. Sometimes background vocals are very important to the aesthetic of a record's production. Queen, which was mentioned earlier. Freddie Mercury has tons and tons of vocal layers, but that's a rock band. What's in most of those songs? Drums, bass, piano, guitar. Most of the time it's those four instruments. What makes it sound so huge and slick is all of those vocal layers. Well, so if that's the type of sound that you're going for, I'm not saying that you want to sound like Queen, but like if you want to have a sound that's embellished by a lot of vocal layers or vocal parts, then it's important to kind of get those in there and have the shape of the song going. I think it's what's important is creating the opportunities, and one basic guitar track should be enough to demonstrate what the parts of the song are. Don't over focus on loading up all these guitar tracks before you've moved on with a bunch of other stuff, or like keyboards. Or don't overdo any one thing. Do the big picture stuff, get the important marquee elements in there first, and then develop around it. You might realize that some of these extra layers that you're doing on keyboards or guitar, or like you think a horn arrangement or strings or whatever, they may not be necessary. They may end up stifling what is really important. Okay, tips for vocal. Okay, we talked about this a little bit before. Take the time to select the right microphone. Figure out that before the recording day. I often try to, if I'm going to go into an unfamiliar studio and they have a limited amount of gear and I'm recording an ensemble of musicians live with the vocal, the last thing I want to end up doing is taking what may be my best vocal mic and use this as my overhead. You figure the vocal is one of the hardest things to record. And I mean, honestly, a drum overhead, there's a lot of good choices you can make. Yeah, will they sound different? But it's not going to make or break the drum sound if you use this microphone versus this microphone, but it will be all the difference on the vocal. So, kind of go through the process we talked about before. Leave room for creativity on the musician's part. If you have experienced musicians, they can add to your arrangement. Okay, so that's why I'm stressing that it's important to get a good working version of the song, get the vocal in there, get the main instrument in there. If you have a really busy piano or guitar part, maybe before you go into a recording session, maybe record a simpler version of it. Maybe your work tape has a very intricate thing that's going on, and maybe that is the vibe of the song. But just as a backup, maybe just record a simpler version so that you have something that you can still have the chord changes and progression of the song in place, but you can turn off that really busy part to give that bass player and that drummer the opportunity to sort of take on some of that rhythmic stuff that you're already doing. And it might sound appropriate as a vocal and one instrument version of the song, start of the song, but you might be overplaying for where you want to go. So that's something to always consider. Leave room for creativity. That they can speak. Experienced musicians can speak into your arrangement. Okay, have contrast with what's in focus and out of focus in your mix. By that I mean in creating a production. Not everything can be in close focus. And that means literally like spatially, as well as spectrally, and volume. It's the idea that things, and in the stereo image, how you place things, you need light and shade. Like if it's all shade, you won't be able to see anything. If it's all light, it's equally sort of, it's just one thing. It's kind of blinding. It's overwhelming. But where you get depth is when you have both. When you have something that has reverb on it and something that's dry, something that's loud, something that's quiet, something that has high frequencies, something that doesn't have high frequencies, some things that have sort of low tones, but they stay out of the way. It's just like you need the contrast. We're working in a two-dimensional medium, right? Left and right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create depth of space. That third dimension is an illusion. Recording is the it's like recording is an illusion. You are a magician. Magicians are not truly supernatural or super magical. They are very good at sleight of hand. They are very good at making you feel and creating something that you cannot wrap your mind around. But they're not superhuman. They have a process, and they have rehearsed it. And that's how you create magic. And record making is, you are an illusionist. Now, even if you're a purist, the only way that I feel like you could win an argument that you had a purist recording is if you recorded everything that was in a song, production, performance with one microphone at one time. Because any magic or relationship that happens has to happen in that moment with those players, with those instruments, in that space around that microphone. And that's, if you watch old videos people performing stuff in the 40s for like radio, there'd be like an ensemble around a microphone, and the lead singer would be the one in front of the microphone because that was the most important thing. And then when it was time for an instrumental solo, the singer would step back, and that instrumental soloist would get closer to the microphone. They were mixing themselves. That's the only way that you're not creating an illusion in recording. So contrast is important. Things that are in focus and out of focus. There's a song, an Elvis song that I heard not that long ago. I think it's "Don't Be Cruel." I'm pretty sure. It's a short song. It's it conforms to that 2.5-minute song that we were talking about before, and it's recorded at Sun Studios, which is like one room, very limited microphones. It's recorded live to 2-track, but they kind of mixed it as they went. I mean, Sam Phillips had some tape manipulation stuff he was doing. He'd get slapback going, but really that recording is the engineer and the musicians working in the moment to create something. So what happens in that song, it's just sort of interesting. It may not be your taste at all, but as a record maker, it is your job to appreciate and take in all kinds of music, because you can pull something from it and learn something from it. So where this ties into contrast, and it's like its arrangement, its performance, its sonic focus, it's so many things. In this particular example, is that the song starts with the intro is very short. It's the guitar playing. It's a very rhythmic riff that basically is kind of the feel and the outline for the movement of the song as an introduction. And I don't even know if it's 4 measures long. Maybe it is. And that as soon as Elvis starts to sing, the engineer obviously had a microphone close on the amplifier and had it loud. And then when it was time for Elvis to sing, Sam ducked that sound down, and it goes back into the room. And all you really do is you hear the guitar playing in the room with the piano, the drums, and it's even hard to determine if it's a full drum kit. You hear brushes on a snare, and there's a little bit of there's a percussive element. It sounds like somebody's hitting the back of an acoustic guitar, or I don't know, some sort of hand drum, and I don't know, bass, piano, guitar, drums. There's a percussive element, and Elvis singing, and then background vocals. As soon as that guitar intro goes away, what the 3 things that are important in that presentation, that performance, that mix are Elvis's voice, that backbeat on the hand drum or guitar or whatever it is, the body of the guitar, and the background vocals. Those 3 things. And you can hear the boogie woogie piano and the drums and the upright bass in the background. And I think I hear the guitar for being so in focus and so distinct about creating intro. It goes away, and it plays a very minor. It plays a role that you don't necessarily perceive, but because you've kind of been told in the beginning what the feel is, you feel like it's still there. And it's very interesting the way that you hear the instruments in the song. Well, actually, the way that you hear the instruments in the song kind of develop, and they're added into the arrangement. I hope I'm thinking of the right song. I'm not confusing 2 songs. And then at the very end of the song, it's a very interesting thing. It goes through maybe 5 cycles of a very similar feel, and at the very end, that electric guitar comes back into focus and just does a ring out chord. And it's very interesting, the contrast and depth of space that provides. I don't know that you'd ever really want to make a record that way now, unless you were trying to make something very stylized. But it's very powerful. And Beatles records, I can go on and on and on. But that's just an example I think of. The last thing it says on this slide here is, don't listen too long, too loud, too long, too loud, too long. It will fool your ears. Many of you may only have one set of speakers, one pair of headphones. Change the volume a lot. It's good to feel the low end and the impact of stuff when things are up loud, but the relationships of volume are not accurate at loud volumes. You bring into play the acoustics of your room, and it starts to reinforce frequencies that are not actually happening coming out of the speaker in a balanced way. Listening at a very low volume, it's much easier to discern how loud the vocal is in relationship to the music that it's being blended with. A snare drum or like things that are bright and percussive are easier to discern at lower volumes. It just sort of change your volume a lot, change your listening environment as much as you can. Don't always find a medium listening volume and walk around your room. Don't sit just in front of the speakers. If you have a couch, go sit on your couch. If you have your bed, go lay on your bed. Go walk down the hall. Play the music to where it's audible and go to your kitchen and listen. Familiarize yourself with all the different ways you can listen to something. And now, obviously, the way your song and production sounds in the kitchen is not going to be the same way it sounds in front of the speakers. But over time, you will learn what sounds correct in the kitchen. I would encourage you to listen to other music you like and go listen to it play it on your studio speakers and go listen to it down the hall. And you will begin to understand how you can train yourself to know how things are balanced. And be very careful with your ears. They're like a candle. Okay? When you've burnt them out, they don't come back. It doesn't come back. You have to go buy a new candle. Getting a new set of ears is not possible. Hearing aids will not enable you to hear the way that you hear now. I'm not saying that you can't hear with hearing aids or that people that have any disabilities can't make good music. I'm just saying, because really what we hear, all of us, myself and you, all of you individually, we all hear things differently. And it has a lot more to do with our brains than it does our ears. Okay? Sure, our ears, over time, our hearing dissipates. I have some ear damage in my left ear. I don't hear frequencies around 4K in my left ear as well as I do in my right ear. But over time, my brain is compensated for that. I don't really feel that when I hear. It feels natural to me. What all this is about is you got to train your brain. And training your brain is, your ears are the conduit to your brain. But be careful with them. Don't listen at crazy volumes too long. Okay, best way to record vocals. Okay, I told you we were going to talk about this. Okay. Boy, we got a long way to go. Hang in there, guys. I will. Microphone, preamp, and compressor. Only a little bit of, it says only a little bit, experiment. And that means that's related to the compressor. The best way to record vocals is find your best microphone. If you have the option to try different preamps, do it. If you only have one preamp, well, there you go. There you have one preamp. Don't EQ your vocal. Don't overcompress your vocal. You're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to learn. 3 to 6 dB, 8 dB, 10 dB of the right compression is okay. It's okay for me because I am experienced. I know what I'm doing. I know how to choose a compressor. I know when I'm going to get myself into trouble. I would recommend a few dB of compression if you're going to record with a compressor. If you can record with a compressor, please do. Learn to do it. If you don't have a compressor or your DAW doesn't allow you to record with a compressor in line, and you have to sort of do it after the fact, do some experimenting. Learn how to learn the proximity to your microphone, how to capture your voice. Because it's also not just about the equipment. It's about you learning how to sing. That's the difference between a great singer and a good singer. Or, it's just like, and someone that knows how to record. I've recorded people that just could not record with headphones and microphone. It didn't work for them. And we'd have to, find a different way to record. But that's something we don't need to get into. Record the vocal very simply. And by simply, I mean, choose the right microphone. if you can choose a mic pre that's the most suitable. Record, don't clip, don't over. Vocal microphone record or vocal recording, it's like I don't know that you ever really want to clip the microphone. Sometimes it's okay. Depends. It's like if it's a real loud, shouty, aggressive type of vocal, yeah, it might be okay, because actually maybe having a little distortion on it might be appropriate. Okay. But usually you don't want to have a sound that's a certain way 80% of the time, and then it's clipping 20% of the time. That's just not going to sound right. It's like if you have a little bit of overdrive on the vocal the whole time, well, sure, that's going to sound great for certain things. Be careful with your level. Don't over compress. When you're recording a vocal, you're going to be looking for 3 to 6 dB of compression some of the time. Not all the time. If something is in compression all the time, it's too much. When you sing quietly, sometimes a compressor may not even kick in, and it only really happens on the really percussive moments that are happening in the quieter singing, and then it really just kicks in for the louder volumes singing, because you're really trying to the compressor is there only to reduce the dynamic range. And you have to compress a vocal several times on the way to a finished product. Do not try to do it all at once. It will not sound good. You will not be able to get a finished vocal sound right out of the gate. It's a little bit at a time. So experiment. So here are some settings and some things to think about. Most of you have what is known as an 1176 emulation. I mean, it's probably the most popular compressor there is, and it's probably the most emulated. Things copied, and so I'm not saying that these settings only apply to it, but on an 1176 you have 4 controls. You have an input, because it has a fixed threshold. The threshold is set at a certain place, and you turn the input level up to the place where the threshold interacts with the signal in the proper way. And then you have the output control to turn the gain up or down based on how much compression you're getting from the input, okay? So you got in and out. And the in on 1176 dictates how much compression you're getting against a fixed threshold. Many compressors have a variable threshold, and they don't, and most of those compressors don't have an input gain. Okay, you see, typically you either have input gain with a fixed threshold, or you have a fixed input gain with a variable threshold. All right, so adjusting either of those to get the 3 to 6 dB of occasional to majority compression is the way to go. And then on 1176 you have 2 other variables. You have your attack time and your release time. The nomenclature, or the way that this is indicated on different units, it varies from compressor type to model type. On an 1176, the slowest attack time is fully counterclockwise. Now, there's a point at which when you take it fully counterclockwise, it'll click, and that turns the compressor off. I mean that it's as all the way counterclockwise slow before you click it off, okay? And then the fastest release time is fully clockwise. And so why am I saying to start at this place? Because you want to let through as much of the transients and articulation of the sound of the voice as possible. And this approach will apply, this thinking and what I'm explaining now applies to compression in general, but we're focusing on the voice. You're going to want to let through as much of the transient articulation and the bright percussive energy as you can. And you're going to want to tailor that to what sounds appropriate. But starting with it all the way slow, because it's already a pretty fast attack, is the way to go. And then you want the compressor to release as fast as possible, because you don't want something loud to happen, and then the voice gets quiet and the compressor is still in compression. You only want it to compress the loud stuff. Excuse me. So, says right there. So that way the compressor isn't reacting too quickly. Start adjusting the input, 3 to 6 dB of compression. Keep the volume dynamic. By volume, I mean keep the output dynamic. Don't turn it into a brick already. It's just like we might get there, but that's 2 or 3 compressors later when we're mixing, and we will talk about that. We'll get there. Don't be on the verge of clipping your input of your converter or your track in your DAW. A totally acceptable recording level for a vocal is like -6, if you're below like -12, yeah, definitely consider getting it up there. But it's a mistake to record everything super hot as close to 0 as you can. That's like a whole other discussion, but I said it, and keep it in mind. Do not record everything like super hot pegged, because you're going to end up having to turn it all way down in your mix, and it's poor gain structure. And we'll get there. Keep the output at a good recording level. I'm doing a good job of like talking about stuff before I actually read it. Okay, I hope you guys are writing down your questions and kind of keeping these things in mind, taking notes, because we still have quite a bit to go. And I'm going to try to make this concise. I don't want to burn out and miss having energy for important stuff. We've talked about these microphones already, 3 types of microphones to have. If you can't afford to have 3 microphones, that's okay. If you only had $400 to spend on a microphone, I'd probably get an SM7 first. This would probably be, if I could only have one mic, I guess it'd be a toss-up between a 57 and an SM7. But I know more voices sound good on this than on a SM57. SM7, also a Shure microphone. It's like the high fidelity version of a 57. So there we go. Start making sonic decisions now. Sort of touched on this a little bit before in what I've been talking about, but you got to go boldly. You have to record as close to the sound as possible as you go, as you think you can. With your limited experiences, maybe you play it a little safe. Don't play it too safe. Don't leave all the decisions. Don't have a bunch of plain Jane sounds at mixing that you just have so much work to do to shape into what your production is. Use inspiration. Go for it. The thing is like if you make a mistake and you record something that's not totally perfect sound wise, chances are you can figure out how to save it. And if you got to re-record it, it's better to re-record it and have had that sound or the intention of the sound informing everything else you record after it and really shaping your production. I guarantee you, when I'm going to give you some video content tips to what to look for, but I guarantee you when you look at professional mixers mixing stuff, the amount of plugins that they're using and the amount of sound shaping that they're doing, it's not that much. Do you know why? It's because the records, and it sounds good. The mix comes together quickly. They can do a great job, and they can spend their time being creative with the mix because the recording has defined the production. So as much as you can, define the sound of your production in the recording phase. Treat the source. Now, I'm not saying print reverb on stuff. I mean, it might be appropriate on a guitar or keyboard part or a piano part or something like, but don't print reverb on your vocal. It might be nice for a background vocal that you intend to be a layer. You have to use common sense. Don't overcommit. Don't paint yourself in a corner. These are the lessons you're going to learn going through this process. Do that cover song, make some mistakes. Be bold. I mean, most of the time, like with an electric guitar, anything that has any distortion on it, I wouldn't use much compression on it, honestly. I mean, it's already a compressed sound because it's distorted. A guitar cabinet or guitar emulation of an amp doesn't have a really broad frequency spectrum. It's already sort of a condensed sound. If I'm recording a cleaner, brighter guitar sound, it's very dynamic. And so, I'm going to want to throw in a compressor and kind of get it to kind of start to condense it down into that right dynamic range. You're going to want to start to figure out how to fit the various instrument tracks into parts of your mix. And you do that when you're recording. Don't leave it all to the mixing phase. Your DAW and your brain won't be able to handle it. And you won't have defined your production along the way. Be bold. I promise you that you'll make mistakes and that you'll be able to fix most of them. I also promise you that if you leave it all to the end, you'll have such a hard time making a mix and getting anywhere that you feel like is finished and as defined as it could be. Make these decisions now. It will make mixing much easier. Start to build the vision of your song from the recording phase. Build a rough mix while recording and producing. Okay, so this is a very, very good point. Anytime that you record something, make a rough mix. And what I mean by making a rough mix is make a new version make a new rough mix version. It's not the final mix. It's a work in progress. It's a demonstration of the work in progress. Make a new rough mix of it's like, okay, so you've got your work tape that's got your vocal and instrumental thing. You get the bass player and the drummer to add to it, or you get some programming down, or you add some keyboards, or whatever it is. Like when you take that next step in the production phase, make a new mix of it. It's not finished, no, but that mix is something you can share with the next person that you might have involved in it. It's something you can take out in the world and listen to and kind of live with. Don't leave it just in your bedroom on your computer, and you have to open up the multi-track session to sort of live with it. Have the experience. The thing is like you're also practicing mixing the song as you go. Build a rough mix. And then that way, like if you get down the road a couple weeks and you've added a bunch of stuff and you've changed stuff and you just sit there and you think, man, this doesn't feel as good as it did a week or two ago. Well, you got that rough mix sitting right there that you can listen to and make an evaluation. You can get some perspective back. And also, if making a rough mix will give you the advantage of going into a new space. If you go when you take your session over to the other musician's house, or you take it into the recording studio, having that rough mix that feels familiar, to be able to reference in that new space on those different speakers, that different circumstance, it's like it's probably going to sound different on different speakers. It's going to feel different in a different room. That's natural. It's not only like physically, and by physically I mean like electronically, acoustically different. It's going to be different. It's going to be colored by the space you're in and the different speakers or the different setup. But emotionally, you're going to be colored in your perception of what your tracks sound like. And so to have the rough mix that you've been listening to in the world and you feel familiar with and makes sense to you in your studio and out in the world, when you go into that other studio, you can be able to listen to that, and you're gonna be able to kind of take it in and say, okay, well, in this environment, the track doesn't sound as bright as I thought it did, or the vocal's louder than I thought it was, or the low end doesn't quite sound the same way. It doesn't have the same impact. Whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily have to be negatives. It's like, wow, it sounds better than I thought it did. Whatever the assessment is, then you can sort of take that and say, let's say that in the other studio, the recording sounds darker than you thought it did. Well, maybe that's something that you're going to need to address later. But the new thing that you're going to record, make it fit what you already have. Don't make it brighter. Don't make it sound appropriately bright to yourself in that space. It's an unfamiliar space, and then it won't match what you've already got. It won't blend in and mix well with what you've got. So there are so many reasons to sort of make work in progress rough mixes, because you're practicing mixing, you're able to live with the result. It's a demonstration of your progress for yourself and others. It can help you find your baseline when you're in an unfamiliar space. There's just so many, many, many positives to it, and definitely totally worth doing. Using effects while recording on vocals. Yes, of course you want to hear effects on your vocals. Do it as an auxiliary track. And by an auxiliary track, I mean have it as a... if you want reverb on your vocal, don't put the reverb plug in your record path, so you're recording the reverb. Also, don't put it on the reverb. Don't put the reverb plug in on the track itself. Some DAWs won't let you hear that reverb while you're recording. Some will, some won't. Put it on an auxiliary track. Put it on another track that you can send the audio to from your record track on a send. And then you have a separate volume for the return of the reverb, and you're going to want it to be fully wet. You're not going to want to have more dry vocal in the reverb return. You're going to want it to be fully wet, and then you can blend in the amount of reverb, and it's always there. But it's not recorded on your vocal track, and you can hear it and send it to your headphones or have it in your mix. And you can send various tracks to that one reverb. I mean, it doesn't have to be just for your vocal. You can use it as a utility reverb. Sometimes when we're recording, we just have one or two reverbs that we can just send stuff to quickly. Sometimes you're going to want short delays, slap delays, long delays, pitch shifting. By pitch shifting, I mean micro pitch shifting. I mean, hopefully most of you know what this is, but it's just like where you slightly detune by 5 to 10 to 15 cents, which is just a micro shift off of the center frequency pitch, and it kind of creates a wider pitch center, and there's a little bit of delay and modulation that's involved. And I'm not going to assume that everybody understands specifically what I'm talking about. This is something to research. Sound Toys makes my favorite pitch shifting. It's an emulation of an H3000, which is an old Eventide effects unit. It's called micro pitch shift, or is it micro? Yeah, Sound Toys. Is it micro pitch, Danny? Is it micro? Yeah, micro pitch. Thank you, Danny. You can get. I'm sure you can get a demo of it and play with it. I just used it on an acoustic guitar. I did an acoustic guitar vocal. I did a record that was just acoustic guitar and vocal. And I didn't want to put a lot of reverb or effects on the acoustic guitar because I didn't want it to sound like it was in some big reverb in space. Delays certainly weren't appropriate. But I needed something to kind of give it a little bit more stereo width and just a little bit more harmonic content. So I put just a little bit of micro pitch shifting on it, and it's just like a 10%, 15% of wet, just a little bit of pitch shift, just a little bit of detuning, and just a little bit of width and just very tight delays. And it didn't really, it kind of almost made it sound like it was trying to be a 12-string guitar. It just had a little bit of chorusing, a little bit of width. It was very, very pleasing. That's a very good vocal effect, which we will talk about again when we get to mixing. Having this in place lets you start to building the mix while recording. Absolutely. And these are things that you can experiment and build with while you are making your rough mixes. Okay, so we talked about this, polarity and phasing and recording. It's not as hard as you think. If anybody, when we get to the end of this segment, if anybody has a question about, because I've kind of already gone over it, and I'm happy to talk about it more. If any of you have any questions about it, let's talk about it at the end of this phase. And this is a very important thing to learn. It took me super long time to figure it out and even realize that it was something to do. But it is critical. It is critical for so many reasons, and I will explain to you about that more. Okay, well, you know what? I'll do it now because we're at our checklist. If things are working in the wrong polarity, they're harder to EQ because it's not moving the speaker in the correct way. I know. Sometimes something will sound fine to me, and then I'll start to try to EQ it. And if the EQ is not responding the way that I think it should, it's not, then I know that I should check the polarity. Or if the sound of something is kind of erratic, where the dynamic and the frequency response doesn't feel as even as I know and think it could and should, I'll check the polarity. When everything is predominantly organized so it's pushing the speaker, it will sound better. It will translate across multiple speakers better. You can get, like, if there's things that are pulling the speaker and in disagreement, you can get it to sound good. And sometimes it's the right choice for some elements. Some elements in a drum kit, meaning like some microphones, or the room sound on a guitar, or because it can kind of, because there's this phase canceling that's going on and they're not in agreement, it can sort of smear the frequency spectrum and kind of make it kind of swim around a little bit, and it can be cool. But what happens when you get it to sound good on one pair of speakers, and then you take it to another pair of speakers, if things aren't in agreement and they're pushing and pulling, or it's like the relationship that the speaker has with the cabinet, because a speaker cabinet has a resonant property. It has a tone and a sound to it. And when the speaker is sucking in and pulling to make an acoustic event happen, it's kind of happening first in the speaker. And so the air in the speaker and all the acoustic properties of the speaker and the speed at which the speaker can move, and there's so many technical things that happen that one speaker to the next kind of different type of speaker doesn't sound the same, and so that relationship that you get to sound good in your speaker won't translate to another set of speakers. You can see behind me, I have 3 sets of speakers that you can see. I also have another small speaker over here. I listen in maybe 4 or 5 different ways. I spend most of my time on the mid-size speaker, but I switch around a lot. And when I switch around a lot, does my mix sound a little different on all the speakers? It absolutely does. But what doesn't change is the basic relationship that I have created and the impact of the low end, the stereo field. Now, the frequency response changes a little bit. Obviously, a bigger speaker is going to have a fuller sound, but it doesn't suddenly sound like a different mix, okay? So if there's any more questions about polarity, please ask me. Have you booked your musicians and studio time where necessary? Are you organized? Lyric sheets, project files, are things notated? Have you made clear notes for stuff? And now I'm gonna something that I wanted to address, because I guess we're about to move on into mixing, and there's a few things, gosh, that I think that I haven't covered that I really wanted to cover. So just continue to hang in there with me and be patient, and we'll get to this mixing stuff. Okay, some recording tips that I wanted to cover. If you're recording an acoustic guitar and vocal, so this is like a big challenge for you on your own, perhaps. What if you want to record without a click? Or you want to be able to record to a click and you really need to sing and play your guitar at the same time, so that the guitar part feels like, so it feels like the performance, so it feels correct to how you know the song and what the intention of the song is. Some performers, singers, they don't feel comfortable not singing and playing. Some don't like to do it. Sometimes, not every song or record is appropriate to do it. But what you need to do is, okay, so here's the way to approach it. How can you have them separate so that you have the guitar performance and the vocal performance, but you can replace the vocals later? You can balance them correctly, have them isolated. Well, the first step, and this goes all the way back to pre-production, is record them together, 2-click, maybe with some easy drummer, maybe some basic bass notes in there, that you've pre-programmed, whatever, or maybe just play and sing to a click, and that's it. Make sure that the click is not too loud in your headphones so that it bleeds into the vocal microphone and the guitar microphone. So where the problem is when you're recording acoustic guitar and vocal together, well, the microphones are like this. Well, of course, I can hear my vocal in my guitar mic, and I can hear my guitar in my vocal mic. I can't turn off my vocal track and I would still hear the vocal in the guitar mic. Maybe not as loud, but so get your performance down of the acoustic guitar and vocal together. And then typically there's less leakage of the acoustic guitar and the vocal mic than there is the other way around. But, just determine which is going to be easier for you to do or first. Oftentimes what I do is, because the acoustic guitar is usually not as loud in the vocal mic, the leakage, I will record the two microphones together, the voice and the guitar together. Then I will, with that vocal performance to the click, I'll turn the vocal down in my headphones so I can hear it and I can follow it. And I'll re-record the guitar, making sure that I'm being true to the performance that I would make with the vocal if I were singing it. Sometimes you got to sing it in your head. Maybe just listening is enough. It might take a little bit of getting used to, but do start with the two things together, and then you have something to measure your guitar performance against. You maybe even do it on a new track so that you can compare the two guitar mics together. So then once you have that isolated guitar performance down, then you can re-record the vocal. And the performance of those things individually has been informed by the initial performance of those things together. I mentioned a record I recorded last summer. We recorded acoustic guitar, vocal, drums, and bass. Those three musicians performed together at the same time. And we didn't record to a click. I'm not, this particular thing, we weren't doing that. So what immediately, as soon as we got the take, or we compiled the takes that we wanted, edited together the beginning of take 3 with the second half of take 4 or take 2, whatever, immediately I would have Ford, who is the singer and acoustic guitar player, I would have him do that. I'd have, okay, Ford, let's replay the acoustic guitar a couple times so that I can have something to comp together for the acoustic guitar. And then once we have that, now sing the song again. And then once we had that, then we move on to recording the next song. Even if you want to keep the initial recording of the acoustic and vocal together, still record a second acoustic guitar in the same setup, in the same moment, same time, because you might want to change something about the vocal later. You might need to tune the vocal in a certain spot. And in order to tune it so that the tuner behaves properly, you might need to sing. Like, let's say you just want to tune one word in the whole song, right? Well, you can get away with sometimes tuning the live vocal, but because you're going to hear some of the live vocal in the acoustic guitar mic, it's going to sound funny. Suddenly it'll sound like two voices happening on that one particular moment that you're correcting on the voice. If you have that acoustic guitar track, your backup acoustic guitar track, you can just substitute in that one moment or that period of time on the acoustic guitar where you've tuned the vocal, so you don't have the two vocals happening together, or you've punched a vocal in to change a lyric or sing a section differently or better or however. Well, then you can patch in that overdubbed guitar, and it's the same thing. When you're recording acoustic instruments like guitar, make a very good documentation. Take a picture if you can. Put tape on the floor where the chair was. Make a note of where the microphone is on the instrument, because you might need to fix something later, and you want to be able to punch it in and have it sound the same. The same goes with vocal. That's why I'm suggesting you record simply. You be consistent, use the same microphone. If you're going to switch a microphone on the vocal in a song, you pretty much are starting from scratch. But the thing is like if you get great vocal takes from the very beginning and you feel like you never beat the verse, well, you can use the verse from pre-production in the final mix, but maybe you re-sing the choruses or you rewrote the bridge or whatever. Be recording more vocal takes along the way. Don't think that you have to do all your vocal recording in one session, or just give yourself the opportunity to be consistent. Document what you're doing, take pictures, make notes, so that you can refer to it later, so that you can punch stuff in. We keep very, very strict and particular notes because it might be 2 months later that we're trying to wrap a song up and it's like something is not right about an instrument in a certain section. Well, are we going to necessarily be able to get exactly the same sound back? No, but we have a really good idea of how to at least set it up to get close, and then we can kind of massage it into place and then fix the part or change the part that we want to change. It's really important with acoustic guitar and miking acoustic guitar that you document it. A couple other tidbits that I want to give you, just to be really thorough here. I'm not, it's just like you might be wondering why did Jacquire tell us to just do kind of like basically what sounds like mono drums? Well, if you're going to record things in stereo, I think it's sometimes more interesting to record it with two different microphones. If you want to record your acoustic guitar with if you want to record it in stereo, which you might if it's a simple production and you want the acoustic to sort of take up a lot of space, using two different microphones can be a good thing. Using the same mic in stereo, like two of the same mic in stereo, doesn't necessarily yield as strong of a pairing in terms of frequency complement. You might put the beautiful condenser mic close to the neck and where all the articulation is, and making sure you get it kind of around the 12th fret or where the neck meets the body, and get the right distance from it and kind of get a full sound. But then you might use this 57, which is kind of a lower fidelity mic. You might put that down near your fingers or over your shoulder, and then you don't necessarily need to use them in equal volume. You can kind of spread them out in stereo. And I think stereo is just much more interesting with unique perspectives. If you're going to record multiple room mics on a drum kit, let's say we go beyond our 3 microphones, I think it's always better to have a room sounds in mono. So you can make interesting placements in the stereo field. I think recordings that are just full of stereo tracks just sounds like there's no real impactful center to them. Everything is just sort of like a soft mono if everything's in stereo, really. I'd rather have a bunch of really distinct, powerful, more monophonic sounds and be able to create a stereo image and create that contrast and depth that way, as opposed to everything just sort of being like equal across both sides. I think it really lacks some of that third dimension that I can create. What other recording tips do I want to give you guys? And that applies to like miking a piano. I'll put a real piano. I would put a small diaphragm condenser or a small diaphragm microphone up on the higher keys, and then a larger diaphragm microphone down on the heel of the piano. Kind of get something very wide and dramatic. Just all different kinds of things. What was the point? I just really want to be sure I'm giving you guys great recording tips. Let me just look at my notes real quick. Just recording vocal, just keep in mind that your voice is going to sound different as it warms up, and over the course of recording, you're going to need to learn how much stamina you have. When your voice warms up, what it sounds like, how close to be to the mic. What does a head voice sound like versus a chest voice? Sometimes these are things you need to sort of begin to understand. Singing from your stomach, like most of the time, you can do more at the source than you can technically with post stuff. Certainly you can shape a lot, but the more effort you put into the source and understanding your voice and how it translates on a microphone, and when it's warmed up, it's important. If your voice isn't warm and you've made 1 or 2 takes early, it's probably going to be hard to make a composite, comp it together with later takes once your voice has warmed up and has changed. Another little tip about singing vocals. I think it's often good to sing the whole song down top to bottom as a start. That will really open your voice up and warm you up, get you into the mood of the song and the journey of the song. But sometimes because of stamina, breath, concentration, focusing on switching between certain melodies and different sections, then maybe you need to take it in pieces. But it's good to have some recordings of the full performance of the song to reference later, or have an understanding of how you're feeling about things. And then when you start to sing, and then you might need those little transitional moments that you can get from those full takes. But when you're singing in sections, make sure, like if you're just singing choruses, make sure you sing the last line of the verse into the chorus so that it's easy to make those edits. Because if you're only singing the beginning of the chorus, your breath might not, the way you're breathing and the way you start might not match up with the way you sing out of the verse, and it won't sound natural. So sing over those transition points, even if you're just singing sections. That's true if you're just singing verses. Sing into the top of the chorus, sing the first line of the chorus, so that when you start to edit those things together, that the rhythmic switches and the way that you're coming off notes or coming up to notes and breathing and all that stuff, it lines up. Otherwise, you can kind of get yourself into trouble. Okay. I already said that. Okay. Let's just do this checklist. I'm sure you guys have lots of great questions that will help me flesh this out a little bit more. You starting with the right song, middle of the pack. Are you clear on the order of instruments you're going to record? Make a plan. There's no right or wrong. Make a plan. Figure it out.